In the Pennsylvania darkness, 1,200 British soldiers advanced toward an American camp with muskets deliberately made useless for firing. Charles Gray had ordered every musket unloaded, every flint removed, and every man forbidden to fire during the attack that night. A single accidental shot could warn Anthony Wayne's division, allowing 2,500 Continentals to form before Gray's smaller force arrived. Silence was not ceremony. It was the mechanism intended to keep British inferiority hidden until distance stopped mattering inside the camp. From the camp, the expected danger was a conventional advance, one announced by movement commands and musket fire across open ground. Instead, dark woodland concealed disciplined columns, while their disabled firearms ensured nervous fingers could not betray the approaching line. Gray had sacrificed his soldiers' easiest response to confusion because surprise promised something gunfire could not deliver: complete dislocation. What seemed reckless on each musket made sense across the battlefield. Wayne's men first had to understand they were attacked. By the time understanding arrived, Gray's advance was supposed to be among the tents, leaving no stable line to command. To understand why that calculation worked, the campaign must return 9 days to another Pennsylvania field and an American defeat. On September 11th, Washington's army met William Howe near Brandywine Creek, trying to block the road toward Philadelphia from the south. Howe maneuvered around the American position and forced Washington away, leaving the capital exposed and the Continental Army shaken. The defeat did not destroy Washington's army, but it narrowed his choices while British troops continued pressing toward Philadelphia. Washington could not simply retreat inland because losing contact would surrender observation of Howe's movements and intentions around the capital. Nor could he concentrate everything beside Philadelphia, because his hungry army depended upon provisions stored northwest at Reading and routes beyond. Those competing needs made geography a command problem. Washington had to watch Philadelphia without severing the road sustaining his army. He positioned forces between Philadelphia and Reading, with units distributed across both sides of the Schuylkill River north of the city. Dividing the army covered several approaches but weakened mutual support. Orders, warnings, and reinforcements now traveled along exposed country roads. A detached command could threaten Howe's communications or supply movements, but British forces might isolate it before help arrived. That dangerous forward role went to Anthony Wayne, a vigorous Pennsylvania officer commanding a division near Chester, southwest of Philadelphia. Washington ordered Wayne to press the British whenever opportunity appeared, and, if possible, capture supplies moving with their army. The mission demanded proximity. Wayne could harass only if he remained close enough to observe roads, camps, and columns. Every mile closer improved his chances of striking a wagon or exposed detachment while reducing his margin for escape. Wayne was not chasing glory without orders. His aggressive posture served Washington's wider effort to keep Howe under observation. Yet the instruction left Wayne balancing incompatible tasks: remain troublesome, avoid destruction, protect communications, and preserve access to supplies. On a campaign map, these aims shared roads. In practice, the same roads allowed British scouts to trace American movement. Rain disrupted movement after Brandywine, and Washington's attempted return toward the British did not produce another immediate battle. Howe's army retained the initiative. Wayne's division therefore operated behind a changing front, where yesterday's shelter could become tomorrow's trap. There was no continuous front. A farmhouse, crossroads, or river crossing mattered only while each army occupied nearby ground. That fluidity encouraged Wayne to believe careful movement might keep his division useful without presenting Howe a clear target. By September 20th, Wayne's troops were encamped near the General Paoli Tavern, west of Philadelphia and north of Chester. The position kept them close enough to threaten British activity while preserving routes toward Washington's other scattered forces elsewhere. Its usefulness carried a severe condition. The division remained safe only while the British lacked precise knowledge of it. Wayne believed his presence had escaped detection, a conclusion that made continued pressure seem possible rather than reckless that night. His confidence was not proof. British intelligence had already located the American camp and converted uncertainty into opportunity for Gray. From the British side, Wayne's detachment was no longer a vague threat moving somewhere beyond the main army in Pennsylvania. It was a mapped concentration near recognizable ground, separated enough from support to invite a fast, independent blow. Accurate location changed the military equation. Gray did not need to defeat Washington or seize every road that night. He needed to reach one exposed division before warning turned resting soldiers into formed battalions capable of organized resistance. By evening, the two commanders were solving opposite problems. Wayne needed concealment to continue his mission. Gray needed silence to end it. That opposition shaped every choice around Paoli because information mattered more than the raw difference in numbers that evening. Gray commanded roughly 1,200 troops against Wayne's approximately 2,500, an imbalance that discouraged any prolonged conventional engagement. British intelligence compensated for that disadvantage by identifying where Wayne had stopped and how far his support remained from immediate reach. The discovery gave Gray a narrow target rather than a wandering opponent and allowed preparation around one specific vulnerability. Wayne's camp was exposed not because open ground automatically doomed it, but because concealment had become its principal defense. If British troops approached unnoticed, Wayne would have little time to transform separated sleeping units into a coherent defensive formation. Gray therefore planned against the warning itself, treating every sound and flash as a potential American reinforcement in time. Muskets ordinarily offered infantry protection during approach, but here their accidental discharge threatened the entire purpose of the operation. Removing ammunition reduced one danger, while taking out the flints removed another, denying each lock the spark required for firing. The order also imposed discipline before movement began. No soldier could answer uncertainty with a revealing shot in darkness. Disabling the muskets did not make Gray's column harmless, because each firearm still carried a bayonet for close assault. It made the advance less flexible, however, since troops encountering a prepared line could not immediately exchange fire effectively. Gray was wagering that Wayne's division would remain unprepared long enough for close contact to replace firepower as the decisive advantage. That wager depended upon route, discipline, darkness, and intelligence remaining accurate until his leading troops reached the encampment edge. If the camp had moved or guards detected the column early, 1,200 Britons could face superior numbers without loaded muskets. The plan's severity came from that trade-off. Gray removed his own options to prevent Wayne from gaining any. Such a decision required troops to maintain order while moving through unfamiliar darkness, where confusion normally produced noise quickly. British movement through the woods concealed the approach from camp, while narrow tracks restricted speed and alignment after nightfall. Every delay consumed surprise because Wayne's security might improve with passing hours, even if no formal warning arrived yet. Speed alone could break formations, so Gray's men needed controlled urgency rather than a reckless rush toward camp ahead. Wayne faced a different calculation, built upon his belief that British commanders still lacked his exact position that night. If that belief held, remaining near Paoli preserved pressure on Howe while keeping Wayne available for Washington's plans nearby. Withdrawal based on every possible threat would make harassment impossible, since detached troops survive operationally by accepting some exposure. The problem was not that Wayne accepted risk. It was that he measured risk with outdated information at Paoli. British intelligence had erased the concealment protecting his position, but nothing visible inside camp necessarily revealed that change yet. An undisturbed road, quiet woodland, and ordinary camp routines could all support the reassuring interpretation that secrecy remained intact. This made Gray's information especially powerful. Wayne could not react to a discovery he did not know had happened. The exposed campsite therefore became dangerous before any British soldier appeared because its governing assumption had already failed silently. Camp security could still have complicated Gray's approach, but it needed enough warning to overcome surprise and dispersion quickly. Once attackers reached the tents, darkness would magnify uncertainty, commands would compete with movement, and local resistance might remain isolated. Wayne's numerical advantage existed across the division, not automatically at whichever point Gray's leading ranks entered first inside the camp. That distinction separated strength on paper from usable strength. Men needed warning, direction, and time before numbers became organized power. Gray's design attacked those requirements in sequence: preserve silence, cross the outer ground, then enter before formation began properly. No gunfire meant no distant alarm carried across camp before the bayonet attack itself announced the British presence nearby. For defenders, the first reliable evidence could therefore arrive almost simultaneously with the need to move immediately under pressure. Orders issued after surprise had to travel through darkness among soldiers uncertain about direction, scale, and escape routes nearby. Even determined units could fight locally, while the wider division dissolved into separate groups, unable to support one another. The coming contest would therefore turn less on total manpower than on which commanders' assumptions survived first contact that night. Wayne still possessed the larger force and routes away from camp, while Gray still faced exposure if discovered early. As Gray's column moved closer, each quiet step preserved his gamble, while each unwarned minute deepened Wayne's danger at Paoli. Before Gray could exploit Wayne's exposed camp, he needed his officers to understand why ordinary infantry habits were dangerous. Orders passed down the column: unload the muskets, remove their flints, and rely entirely upon cold steel at close range. Ammunition might remain carried elsewhere, but nothing inside the locks could permit an impulsive trigger pull to ignite powder. The removed flints were tiny objects, yet their absence physically enforced Gray's command more reliably than whispered reminders could. A nervous sentry, a stumbling soldier, or a mistaken shadow could no longer trigger a rolling exchange of fire. Gray had converted silence from an expectation into equipment, building the plan into every disabled musket his troops carried. That measure also told the soldiers what awaited them. Their success depended upon reaching Americans before Americans could organize. No preliminary volley would soften the camp, and no scattered firing could rescue units losing direction after contact began. Officers had to preserve alignment, identify the route, and keep men moving despite darkness that hid friend and obstacle alike. Gray accepted those limitations because a firefight would favor Wayne's larger force once noise summoned the entire division to arms. The British column left its preparations behind and entered ground where branches, tracks, and darkness could disorder even trained infantry. Close spacing helped commands pass quietly, but compressed soldiers were vulnerable to confusion if the leading files suddenly stopped. Each man carried a musket incapable of firing, turning the bayonet from reserve weapon into the operation's central instrument. The approach demanded restraint first and violence only after arrival, a sequence easily ruined by fear or premature movement. Darkness covered the redcoats that daylight would expose, while woodland screened the column from distant observation near Wayne's camp. Yet darkness also denied Gray a clear view of his own formation, making junior officers essential to cohesion throughout the march. Their task was practical: hold direction, prevent gaps, and keep silence without allowing caution to stall the advance in woods. British discipline mattered because surprise was perishable. One challenge, one discharge, or one shouted correction could spend it instantly. The route toward Paoli brought Gray's troops across dark country where the tavern and encampment anchored their objective ahead of them. Intelligence could guide the column near Wayne, but it could not eliminate every fence, turn, or uncertain landmark along the route. Progress, therefore, depended upon matching reported geography to ground barely visible beneath filtered moonlight and heavy woodland shadow that night. Any mistaken branch of the route could consume the short interval before American pickets recognized movement and raised the alarm. Gray's force remained outnumbered, so delay did more than slow arrival. It increased the chance of facing formed battalions. Formed battalions could exploit British silence against them, firing while Gray's unloaded troops struggled to close the remaining distance. Every concealed yard therefore served two purposes. It brought the bayonets closer and kept Wayne's numerical advantage unusable for another minute. The operation was not designed to win a balanced contest. It was designed to prevent balance from emerging at all. Inside the American position, ordinary camp activity offered no obvious measure of how close Gray's column had come through the woods. Men rested near equipment that would matter only if warning gave them time to assemble, receive orders, and move. Campfires offered limited light around tents, but illumination could reveal movement without explaining whether it signaled danger or routine. A guard hearing something uncertain had to interpret it before acting, and darkness made harmless sounds difficult to separate from approaching danger. Gray's plan exploited that interval between perception and certainty, when a warning might still be delayed or discounted as uncertain. Wayne's belief that his location remained concealed shaped the meaning of ambiguous signs around the camp's wooded edge that night. Without prior reason to expect an immediate assault, a faint disturbance need not indicate 1,200 British troops approaching. Security failed most dangerously when separate clues never accumulated into a warning strong enough to change the camp posture. Even after suspicion began, time remained decisive. Wayne's division needed minutes to turn scattered men into functioning units under command. Gray sought to compress those minutes into seconds by carrying silence intact to the first American positions near the camp. The closer his leading files came, the less useful any warning became, because distance had already been surrendered to the attackers. An alarm raised far outside camp could produce a line. An alarm raised among tents could produce only fragments. Those fragments might resist, retreat, or search for orders, but they could not immediately act as Wayne's entire division. Near the encampment edge, Gray's gamble entered its final approach, with surprise preserved but not yet converted into victory. Near 10 o'clock, Gray's leading troops approached the camp's outer edge with their silence still protecting the operation from discovery. No distant musket flash had crossed the fields, and no rolling volley had carried warning among Wayne's tents that night. The column had survived its most fragile stage, though one challenge could still give the defenders precious time to form. Woodland no longer merely hid the British approach. It delivered them close enough to make darkness an American problem too. Soldiers at the front now faced a narrow transition from controlled movement to sudden pressure without losing direction or cohesion. If they hesitated, the camp could awaken. If they scattered, Wayne's larger division might defeat them in separate groups. Gray needed momentum without noise, close order without congestion, and obedience after the concealment of the woods ended around them. His preparations had carried the attack this far. From here, surprise had to produce immediate operational confusion inside camp. At Wayne's position, the first clear alarm came too late to create a single defensive front across the encampment. British troops emerged from concealment and entered the camp before most Americans could identify the attack's direction or scale. The encounter unfolded after dark, among tents, equipment, and uncertain routes, conditions that punished every delay in command and response. Men awakened into a crisis already at close range, where loaded muskets in superior numbers could not be coordinated quickly. Some Americans attempted resistance, but local efforts could not become the organized division Wayne needed to contain Gray's advance. Orders competed with the noise of movement as soldiers searched for units, officers, safe routes, or defensible ground nearby. The camp's layout now worked against its occupants. Tents and scattered equipment broke sight lines while darkness obscured friendly positions. British pressure reached separate parts of the encampment before warning could join them into one shared response across the camp. Wayne could command a division only through an operating chain of officers and formed units. Surprise disrupted both at once. His troops still possessed courage, weapons, and escape routes, but those assets belonged to disconnected groups under immediate pressure. Gray's smaller force gained temporary superiority wherever concentrated ranks met Americans who were still assembling or moving without direction. The ban on firing also kept British volleys from masking commands or warning untouched sections farther across the camp too early. Silence had ended as concealment, but the absence of volleys continued limiting how far reliable information traveled through the encampment. Americans beyond immediate contact could hear upheaval without knowing whether it marked a raid, breakthrough, or encirclement nearby in darkness. Uncertainty delayed useful concentration, while visible movement away from the first pressure encouraged others to follow the same routes. Once retreating groups crossed through resting units, they carried confusion faster than formal orders could restore control across camp. The division began losing cohesion before every soldier understood what had happened, turning numerical strength into crowded vulnerability and darkness. Wayne faced the commander's nightmare of a battle already inside his position, without a stable line from which to recover. Remaining in place risked isolation, while movement through darkness risked spreading panic and opening more ground to Gray's men. No reserve could function decisively until someone knew where the British advance ended and which American formations remained intact. That knowledge arrived piecemeal, if at all, because darkness and disrupted units reduced reports to fragments of local experience. Gray's men did not need to surround the entire division, they needed only to keep its pieces from reconnecting. Each American group driven from the camp center made the remaining position harder to understand and defend coherently nearby. Equipment left behind marked the speed of the collapse more clearly than any orderly withdrawal could have done that night. Tents, packs, and abandoned camp articles remained where prepared soldiers should have assembled, showing how completely warning failed them. Resistance could slow British groups locally, yet no general recovery emerged before Wayne's position became impossible to hold together. Americans moved away through surrounding fields and roads, seeking distance from an attack whose boundaries remained uncertain in darkness. Escape preserved many men, but it also confirmed the division's route, because survivors could not quickly reform nearby that night. Behind them, the encampment ceased functioning as a military position. Its scattered contents now recorded the lost initiative at Paoli. Gray's wager had worked at the critical point. The larger force never received enough warning to use its size. Victory inside the camp did not settle what Paoli would mean, because losses, prisoners, and testimony would reshape it. Dawn would reveal what darkness had concealed, leaving Americans and Britons to count consequences and contest the night's meaning. Dawn spread across Wayne's abandoned camp, revealing overturned equipment, empty tents, and the hurried paths survivors had taken overnight. British soldiers held the ground briefly, surrounded less by organized resistance than by evidence of sudden American departure everywhere. Gray had achieved his immediate objective without fighting the prolonged firefight that his smaller force could ill afford there. The disabled muskets had carried British infantry into decisive range, where American formation mattered more than individual readiness or courage. Once cohesion vanished, Gray's men could capture isolated soldiers and clear the encampment before Wayne restored central control nearby. British success remained tactical and limited, not the destruction of Washington's army or the Philadelphia campaign itself outright. Wayne had lost his position, equipment, and immediate capacity to threaten British movements from the Paoli area that night. His surviving troops still existed, but a division scattered across unfamiliar roads could not resume its assigned mission quickly. The result vindicated Gray's narrow calculation. Surprise could temporarily outweigh numbers when warning, command, and formation disappeared together completely. The same darkness that enabled victory made later accounts fragmentary, intensely local, and difficult to reconcile with confidence. Official summaries placed American losses at roughly 272 killed, wounded, and captured during the assault en route. Of those, 53 Americans died, a grave toll that remained far below later impressions of near-total slaughter at the camp. Most American losses were prisoners, showing how disorganization trapped men who could neither form effectively nor escape the confusion. British losses were reported as 11, underscoring how completely surprise prevented Wayne's superior numbers from generating sustained resistance there. That disparity did not prove Americans unwilling to fight. It showed how few encountered the attack as organized units. A soldier reaching his musket after the British entered camp possessed a weapon but lacked the protected space to use it. An officer locating several men still needed bearings, orders, and contact with neighboring units before resistance could spread effectively. Gray denied those requirements simultaneously, which explains why the rout developed faster than any balanced comparison of troop totals suggests. The battlefield consequence was visible in absence. No continuous American line, no coordinated counterattack, and no secure center remained. Wayne escaped the immediate disaster with survivors, but preserving men afterward could not erase the loss of his command's cohesion. Across roads beyond camp, separated groups sought familiar officers and routes back toward the wider continental deployment before daylight. Reforming required identifying who remained, recovering weapons and equipment where possible, and rebuilding chains of command after flight overnight. These tasks consumed time Wayne had been ordered to spend watching British activity and threatening vulnerable supplies throughout the region. Thus, Gray's raid achieved more than possession of tents. It temporarily removed an active American threat from Howe's surroundings. The attack did not solve every British problem around Philadelphia, where Washington's surviving army still constrained Howe's freedom of movement. Nor had Wayne's division ceased to exist. Its defeat was severe, but recovery remained possible once survivors reassembled elsewhere. The immediate military outcome was therefore precise: one exposed division routed, its harassment mission interrupted, and British initiative protected. Public memory would assign Paoli a wider meaning, driven less by maneuver than by what witnesses said happened nearby. Accounts from Continental soldiers described a ruthless close-range assault and alleged that men seeking mercy received none that night. Such reports emerged from surviving participants who had experienced darkness, collapsing formations, and bayonets at extremely close quarters personally. Their testimony cannot be reduced to propaganda, but individual nighttime observations could not describe every encounter across camp reliably. British tactics also guaranteed terrifying intimacy because Gray had deliberately removed gunfire and required contact with bayonets throughout the assault. What produced tactical efficiency for Gray consequently produced the darkest possible interpretation among Americans who survived the camp that night. The term massacre captured that interpretation, shifting attention from Wayne's exposed position toward British conduct during the victory itself. Patriot writers could use Paoli as evidence of enemy brutality, strengthening outrage even though most American casualties survived the attack. The 53 deaths remained real, while allegations of denied quarter made the event morally explosive beyond its operational scale. This political afterlife did not alter why Gray succeeded, but it changed how Americans remembered the means he selected. Gray's removed flints became a compact symbol, simultaneously representing disciplined surprise to Britons and deliberate mercilessness to patriots afterward. Wayne's own conduct now faced scrutiny because the attack exposed both British preparation and American failures of security there. Charges would force a different question from the battlefield's immediate logic: whether Wayne had merely been surprised or had failed disgracefully. Scrutiny began with an uncomfortable distinction. Wayne had followed an aggressive mission, yet his security arrangements had failed catastrophically. An army could honor a commander's intentions while still judging his campsite, precautions, and assumptions dangerously inadequate at Paoli. Charges of misconduct placed Wayne under formal examination, threatening a reputation already built around energy, aggression, and personal courage. The evidence had to address his orders, intelligence, camp placement, warning measures, and conduct once Gray's attack began inside camp. Wayne could not deny the rout, but defeat alone did not establish cowardice, dishonor, or deliberate neglect of duty. An initial inquiry did not convict Wayne of misconduct, although it concluded that he had committed a tactical error. That judgment separated character from competence, recognizing honorable service while identifying a battlefield decision that left his soldiers dangerously exposed. Wayne refused to let partial vindication stand because the remaining criticism could permanently stain his command reputation among fellow officers. He demanded a full court-martial, seeking a public determination that his behavior had remained honorable throughout the disaster. This insistence revealed more than wounded pride, since Continental authority depended heavily upon trust between commanders and subordinate officers. The court-martial examined whether Wayne had obeyed orders, guarded his division adequately, and responded honorably under surprise attack. Evidence could establish movements and orders more confidently than every confused encounter reported from the darkened camp that night. The court ultimately determined that Wayne had acted honorably, even as the tactical error attached to Paoli remained clear. Exoneration did not make his position secure retroactively or restore the warning his division had lacked entirely that night. It defined the limit of blame. Serious misjudgment did not automatically mean disgrace when a commander faced incomplete information. Wayne had believed himself undiscovered and continued pursuing the harassment mission Washington assigned him after Brandywine near British lines. That belief was wrong, and his exposed camp magnified the consequence, but the mission itself required accepting danger nearby. Gray succeeded not because Wayne lacked courage, but because British intelligence invalidated the assumption supporting Wayne's choices before nightfall. Once the assumption failed, every weakness in camp security became more consequential, and every minute without warning favored Gray. The court's result preserved Wayne's honor without erasing causation, a balance later retellings often struggled to maintain about Paoli. American witnesses supplied another kind of record, focused upon close encounters rather than command decisions or operational geometry alone. Lieutenant Colonel Adam Hubley reported British troops showing little mercy toward Americans who had fallen during the confusion inside camp. Major Samuel Hay characterized the scene as extraordinary butchery, language that Patriot accounts repeated beyond the battlefield in Pennsylvania. Such testimony reflected genuine trauma and plausible observations, while darkness prevented any witness from seeing the whole camp clearly. Claims that surrendering men received no quarter became central to Paoli's reputation, although precise circumstances remained contested for generations. Propaganda did not require inventing the defeat, because bayonet tactics, 53 deaths, and survivor testimony already carried force widely. It selected the moral frame, presenting Gray's silence not as operational discipline, but as deliberate preparation for merciless assault. From a British operational view, removing flints prevented warning and reduced exposure during an attack against superior numbers at Paoli. The same act could therefore signify tactical control to one audience and calculated brutality to another afterward across America. Gray's resulting nickname, No Flint Gray, compressed the entire method into 3 words that survive detailed explanations of Paoli. The nickname preserved the means of victory, yet concealed the intelligence work and Wayne's assumptions that made it possible. Without the camp's location, Gray's silent column would have lacked a target and risked wandering through hostile country at night. Without Wayne's exposure, British discipline alone could not have produced the same swift collapse inside the encampment that night. Without the removed flints, one accidental discharge might have converted intelligence and opportunity into a costly frontal fight instead. The outcome came from the intersection of information, terrain, camp security, disciplined movement, and Wayne's mistaken confidence that night. This combination explains why simple labels like massacre or masterstroke each illuminate only part of Paoli that September night. Wayne remained in Continental service after exoneration, so Paoli became neither his final command nor permanent ruin in war. Its memory stayed attached to him, however, because honorable conduct did not cancel responsibility for tactical exposure at Paoli. Nearly 2 years later, another nighttime assault would place Wayne outside British fortifications at Stony Point in New York. There, Paoli would return not as a courtroom question, but as remembered grievance inside a new attack after dark. Nearly 2 years after Paoli, Continental orders sent Wayne against British fortifications at Stony Point beside the Hudson River. This time, Wayne commanded the night attack, and Paoli supplied his soldiers with a remembered grievance rather than an unexpected warning. The assault also relied on close approach and bayonets, although its tactical circumstances differed sharply from Gray's attack on an exposed campsite. Wayne invoked Paoli before the attack, converting an earlier rout into motivation for disciplined action against prepared defenses at Stony Point. Victory there restored no lives and erased no error, but it demonstrated that Wayne's command had survived defeat, inquiry, and shame. Paoli's decisive moment had occurred before British troops entered camp, when Gray deliberately made every musket unable to fire. That order looked like self-disarmament, yet it removed the one battlefield accident most capable of rescuing Wayne's larger division. Gray traded firepower for time, then used intelligence and disciplined movement to deliver his smaller force where numbers briefly stopped mattering. Wayne's error completed the mechanism because his camp depended upon secrecy after British intelligence had already stripped that protection away. The first alarm therefore arrived as contact, leaving no interval for orders, formations, or superior manpower to shape the battle. Gray's success was decisive at Paoli, but limited beyond it. Washington's army remained active, and the wider campaign continued. The immediate price was borne by Wayne's division, roughly 272 killed, wounded, or captured, with 53 dead. British losses of 11 revealed the tactical imbalance after surprise, not any moral simplicity about what happened among the tents. Eyewitness allegations that quarter was denied ensured the victory carried a reputational cost no casualty table could measure fully. Patriot memory called it a massacre, while Gray's nickname preserved the chilling practical detail that his muskets lacked flints. Neither label alone explains the result, because outrage describes the experience while military analysis must reconstruct the conditions producing it. Gray was neither invulnerable nor omniscient. Early detection could have exposed 1,200 men carrying firearms deliberately disabled for battle. Wayne was neither a coward nor blameless. His honorable service coexisted with a tactical error that made surprise devastating. Paoli worked exactly this way, because one commander possessed accurate information and physically prevented his own troops from wasting it. One small missing object, multiplied across a disciplined column, preserved silence until an exposed camp could no longer recover. At dawn, the Flints remained absent, Wayne's division remained scattered, and the battlefield already carried two incompatible, enduring memories. Subscribe for more military history and decide, was Gray's enforced silence more decisive than Wayne's exposed position at Paoli?